Hey everybody, I'm JJ Johnson. You're watching Reality Survival, and today we are going to talk about the EMP shield. And
Tired of the same chemical-based lawn care?
I do it every time. I forget to turn that thing off. We're going to be talking about the EMP shield, and we're going to a little bit about EMPs and what this thing does, what it doesn't do, all that kind of stuff. And so why don't we start with you, and you can tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do for EMP Shield, and then we'll move on to Tim.
Yeah, thanks, JJ. Hey, so hi everybody. I'm Andrew. I am the marketing director here at EMP Shield. So my job is usually to talk to customers, make sure we have a good marketing strategy. We've got a really unique product that's kind of not been seen before. So my job is to make sure people understand it and get the brand awareness out for EMP Shield.
Very cool. And Tim, you are the founder and director of EMP Shield, is that right?
I am the founder and director of EMP Shield. Founded it back in 2017. And we have a military grade EMP protection device. It's designed to come out for civilians, and actually designed it so people can actually have something to be protected. A lot of things are designed for military, which this is designed for military, and we do sell it to the military, but it was also designed for the average person to be able to be protected in the process too.
Very cool. So to start out with, why don't we cover a little bit about just what is an EMP, or maybe also touch on a CME as well. I think those are primarily the two main events that, as well as surge protection, that this product covers. Is that right?
Yes. Well, when you're looking at what an EMP is, there's a couple of things on EMP. You have a nuclear electromagnetic pulse, and you have a CME, which is a coronal mass ejection. When you have a nuclear EMP, you have three different distinct pulses. You have the E1, an E2, and an E3. When a nuclear bomb goes off, it gives off gamma rays. And the gamma rays hits the atmosphere. And the gamma rays, when it hits the atmosphere, you have your protons and photons that give off an electron. Well, when the gamma rays hits the atmosphere, it peaks. Those electrons peak in 5 nanoseconds. So when you're looking at the E1 spike, and that is the killing spike for electronics, it will actually peak in 5 billionths of a second and is over in 1 microsecond. So when you're looking at a nuclear EMP, the very first and killing spike is at its peak in 5 billionths of a second, and in 1 millionth of a second, it's over. The E2 starts at 1 microsecond, and then it is over within 1 second. And then the E3 starts at 1 second and can go for several hours because the atmosphere is charged. Where a coronal mass ejection is just like an E3. It can go for several hours. But the thing on an EMP, why you don't have a warning system. By the time that you could even detect the E1, it's already over, because within 1 millionth of a second, it's done and finished. So your protection has to be active and be looking at it at all times. And if it sees that threshold voltage start going up, it has to act immediately. And that's where the EMP shield comes in. The military specifications for a real EMP protection device says that you have to be able to take 5,000 amps to ground, conductor to conductor, conductor to neutral, or neutral to ground within 20 nanoseconds, or within 20 billionths of a second. With the technology, we use 3 different technologies within our device. We actually take over 5,000 amps to ground, conductor, conductor, neutral to ground, or ground or conductor to ground within a half a nanosecond, about 500 trillionths of a second. And we have military testing lab that is certified that we have backup documented testing results that we do that and that we comply. That's
right. And Tim, actually,
set apart from the competition. We actually have true testing results to where we comply to the military standard.
And is that where you guys sent it off to was it the Keystone Lab, if I remember?
It's Keystone. Yeah. And so I just wanted to highlight them real quick. They're actually one of the premier DoD testing facilities in the United States. It's not a cheap endeavor to do these things, but we went through the process of doing them just to show everybody that we're serious and what our product is actually serious. And I just want to highlight, Tim, and I'll let you continue, is we didn't just meet one military standard. We've actually met almost all of the EMP military standards to include 188, 125-1, 461 Golf, 464 Charlie. And we also did one RS-105 testing where you actually irradiate the device with wiring as well. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And our EMP testing went all the way back to our very first version back in November of 2017. We started out when we brought our very first version out. We were a military compliant, true EMP, high altitude EMP compliant device from the very beginning.
So talking a little bit more about an EMP and the kind of effect that can have if let's say a nuclear bomb detonates 300 miles over the top of Kansas, who gets affected with something like that?
Everybody. Where you're above Kansas, you're in the middle of the United States, it will affect everybody in the southern part of Canada, everybody from the East Coast to the West Coast in the United States, and the northern part of Mexico.
Okay.
When you're looking at how an EMP works, the electrons are coming down across the grid. So with our EMP shield mounts within the main electrical panel. So yes, you're going to get the surge coming in from the grid. But that's not only where you're getting the surge. Those electrons are coming through the roof of your home, coming through the roof of your building. So you're also getting a surge coming from within your structure itself. With the EMP shield mounted within your electrical panel, we're looking, and that's why we have been tested and up to 250 feet from the panel. When the electrons come in, one of the military standards says that we have to maintain no more than 1,000 volts per microsecond rise. With our technology being able to go to ground less than 1 nanosecond, we can draw all of those free electrons or that current from the EMP shield. We can take that to ground to where it will not rise and let the voltage rise within your home.
So interesting. So basically you're saying that anything that's plugged in within your home is you're essentially shunting the electricity, kind of sucking the electricity, basically, and I'm using like layman's terms here, but out of all the wires and cables in your home and pushing it to ground so that it doesn't damage the items that are in your home.
That's correct. And what's interesting,
every bit of that over voltage that you would get from the EMP, that's exactly what our unit does. It shunts and shorts all of that over voltage that would come through from the EMP into your electrical wiring and through your home or through your business. We take and shunt that to ground. That's exactly what our equipment does to and protects your home. That is why if you have anything plugged into it, it doesn't matter whether it's your cell phone charger or your computer, your TV, your microwave, doesn't matter what is plugged in. If it is plugged in, we can protect it up to 250 feet from the EMP shield.
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a minute. If the grid is down and there's no electricity, why do I want to have EMP shield plugged into my house?
Because hey, Tim, I'll jump on this one. Okay. So basically there's a couple reasons. The first is If you do have a backup power supply like a generator, wind power, or solar, your home's still going to function. Because remember, when an EMP occurs, the charge that builds inside your system is going to fry specific things inside the system. So your home will not be functional with electricity that you would normally have. So that's the first thing, is your home is still functional. Everything is still operational. If you have a backup power system, you're good to go. And there's a lot of people that have off-grid systems that have solar that are buying these, and a lot of people even in the city that have systems that are keeping EMP shields so they can still run their home. The second thing is, when the grid does eventually come back up, whether it's 2 days, 2 months, or even 2 years, your home is still operational. So when the power does come back on, and let's say it's a solar flare and the power comes back on in 2 weeks, your house is back up and running. Because remember, all these other houses that don't have protection are going to be, portions of them are going to be destroyed in the electrical systems. So those are two very big reasons that you really want to make sure you have protection, because if your electrical system is damaged, you're going to have to fix it before you can use it again. The other thing is just lightning in general. There's very few things on the market that offer 100% lightning guarantee. And we are one of the few, at a price point at around just above $300. We offer a 100% lightning guarantee, because we've actually had 4 houses get hit last year with the EMP shield that incurred 0 damage on the home. And we do have actually an insurance policy that would cover up to $25,000 should the device fail, because that's how sure we are about the device. So.
Okay. Very cool. So
yeah,
if I understand everything, you're basically saying, and I'm just kind of rephrasing here. So an EMP hits, I can then go out to my transfer box, click myself off the grid, hook my generator into it, and my house is still running. Everything that was plugged in is all still going to be good to go. That's pretty
correct.
cool. So I got a couple questions here in the chat I'd like to hit real quick. Richard Slonger says, who said there would be just one EMP? It could be more like 30 that are used.
Oh, Tim, get this one.
Okay, let me clarify on what happens when you have an EMP. When the first atomic bomb goes off, the first nuclear bomb, it releases the gamma rays and it starts charging the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
After you have the first atomic bomb go off, for the next 8 to 9 hours, the atmosphere is charged. You will not have another E1 or E2 spike for 8 to 10 hours. The atmosphere itself has to literally discharge before you can have another E1 or E2 spike. Because
so there's a certain carrying capacity in the ionosphere in order to generate the Compton effect. Is that kind of like?
Because the gamma rays have already hit the photons and protons. They've already lost their
release.
Electron. There's no more free electrons. They have to actually gather, and there's no extra electrons to be able to be freed until the charge comes back.
So
sure,
when
go ahead. So I was actually just going to jump on this real quick too. So let's say that there is some magical EMP device that would continue, a high altitude nuclear weapon that would continue to operate
against
defying the laws. Again, defying the laws. The EMP shield was actually tested we hit it 42 times with an EMP at Keystone, the military certified DoD testing lab, with 0 degradation. It can take multiple EMPs. And that's the question we get all the time is, well, is it a one shot, one kill? It's not. You could have an EMP happen the next day, 24 hours, have an EMP happen. It's still operational. So,
is that the same for lightning?
It's not. So with lightning, it is a one shot, one kill. So it will stop a lightning strike from destroying your home, destroying the electrical system, but the device pulls a kamikaze, as I like to call it. So it will kill itself to protect the home. And that's where the warranty comes into play. So we do have a limited lifetime warranty. If you get hit by lightning, you send it back to us, $50 replacement. We give you a new one, and then we like to dissect them and see what happened inside the box. But the last 4, you did exactly what they're supposed to do.
Very cool.
When you're looking at a single lightning strike that can light up Manhattan, Washington, or Manhattan, New York, for several minutes, then yes, you're looking at a difference between a very high voltage spike for just a few microseconds compared to a lightning strike that can light up the city of New York for quite some time. So there's a big difference between a lightning strike and an EMP.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jason McDonald asks, where is the device attached in the home?
It is attached at the electrical panel.
Okay.
You tie it into L1 and L2, and it's connected through a 20 amp circuit breaker direct to your electrical panel.
Okay, and Sherry Phillips says, just tuning in, are we in danger of an EMP? Do you guys think that how do you classify the danger? I have always personally said that I think it's a fairly low probability because of the defenses that DoD has. But the thing is it's still a pretty severe thing. If it did happen, it's pretty severe. So where do you guys fall on that?
So I'll jump on that, JJ. So I agree with you. I think it's a very low threat. If we're talking a man-made EMP, it's going to probably be a nuclear weapon going off in the atmosphere. There is a little bit higher threat from a solar flare, which does create a similar effect. However, we are seeing an increase in the drive to protect the country against an EMP, which does show that there is a threat out there. President Trump just signed an executive order March 6th, basically stating that the government had 90 days to identify key structure or infrastructure that needed to be protected, and a few other rules in there that they had to comply with within 90 days. And then immediately following the release of that, Department of Homeland Security released a EMP resilience report where they actually went into detail about risks of EMP, certain things, and listing vendors. We were listed as an EMP protection vendor by the Department of Homeland Security in that report. So what that shows to us is, and we got several phone calls from the government after the same day as the executive order. There is a significant drive right now to protect against it, whether that's an indicator of an increased risk. Some perceive yes, some perceive it's just maybe they're finally doing it. Should have done it 10 years ago. But the reality is it is a risk. It could be detrimental to the country, and that's why we're here right now. So
it is sort of our Achilles heel. It's kind of the one thing that would be pretty devastating, that where it would be difficult to do a lot of other things on that wide of a scale. So just Dano, he says, how does the car version keep the electronic wave from the wiring and sensor under the hood of a car? You guys have a car version as well, huh?
Yes, sir.
We have a car version, and when you're looking at how it affects the car, we have a wire that goes to the negative of the battery. We have one that goes to the positive of the battery. And we have one that goes to the chassis. When you have an EMP that affects the car, it's the chassis of the car that ends up with the potential compared to the battery. And we take that energy, any of the differential of the energy, and we shunt it or short it so it doesn't get to the electronics. So that's how we take the difference of the potential. The potential is actually going to be between the chassis and the power going to your electronics, whether it's to your UJVC stereo that you have, or to the ECM computer, or to any of the electronics. And we have our voltage threshold set to where we keep that from being able to be spiked to several thousand volts. We keep that set to where it keeps that down. Not only do we do it for vehicles like that, but we also do it for military striker units, etc. And we also have a special unit that goes on for antennas and for communications for mobile vehicles too, that we do for military.
So basically what I'm hearing you say is I spent several $1,000s on an old 1980 GMC bug out vehicle for nothing, right?
I did back in the day too. I did too.
No, if you have a vehicle that has a points and plugs and rotor cap, you're in good shape. But if you have anything from the mid to late 80s that has any kind of injection on it whatsoever, you definitely need something to protect it with.
Yeah. And actually, I'll jump on this real quick too, Tim. So there's a big misconception. I know a lot of people just don't quite grasp how the EMP works and what it is, but something that we've learned in our testing with Keystone is induction rate on conductors is actually not as high as you would presume it to be. I won't go into the details on it, but it's actually significantly lower, much, much lower than we presumed it would be. So the induction rate on your vehicle from the freed electrons coming from the atmosphere is not going to be, it could be devastating, but it's actually not as significant as you would think. So
interesting. So David asks, he says, an interesting question here. He says, what if the panel is outside the home? Does it need its own box?
No, it does not. Our unit is UL IP66 rated. It is able to be mounted outside. It is a fully potted unit. So it takes a piece of conduit going into the side of your electrical panel, and it can be mounted outside. Actually, it can even be mounted in a bucket of water. It is completely sealed.
Okay, that's great. Good deal there. And I guess I'll just show the different ones that I have here in front of me real quick. So this is the base model, or I shouldn't say base model, but the one you were telling me that is for an electrical panel that is not flush mounted. Is that right?
Correct. Yes, that's for a breaker box that extends from the wall, and that will go into the side of the kickout on the breaker box.
And then we have another one is for a flush mount. Is that right? So this part would go behind the wall, and then this part would be out here. What do these little LEDs tell us? What is that?
Tim, you want to jump on that?
The LEDs indicate that you have power going to the EMP shield. The EMP shield can only protect if it is connected to a live circuit.
Okay.
So that's letting you know that the circuit breaker is turned on and that it is connected to a live circuit, so it can show protection.
Gotcha. And then this one here, what is it for?
That unit is designed, and actually was designed for Homeland Security, to where they have mobile units. It can be plugged into a portable generator. It is mobile for mobile communications and can be used when you're traveling also.
Okay. So that's interesting. So I guess if I was going to put one of these on my house and then use a generator later, I could use this with the generator just to is that kind of like doubling up, or would that be even necessary?
You absolutely could. You could plug it in. And what's interesting about the plug-in model is it's not just when you plug into it that it protects. Whatever you plug it into, that entire phase is also connected or also protected, right? So you plug it into the wall, that line, that phase, so L1 or L2, whatever it is protected against an EMP. If your generator is 110 volts, it's protected as well if it's plugged in.
Interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Any plans? So Jason McDonald says, any plans for an amateur radio version?
We have amateur radio antenna versions. Matter of fact, when we did our last testing at Keystone Compliant for antennas, they are also mil standard tested for EMP, and we are making, for the military and for striker units, we are making antenna units for the military and DHS specifically.
Very cool. So I just want to let everybody know that there's a link in the description below. These guys have been kind enough to offer all Reality Survival viewers a discount of $50. So that would put most of these units at right around 300. Is that about right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And that's cheaper than you can get it anywhere else. Is that also right?
That is correct. Yes. So we basically redefined how we're doing pricing. $50 will be the cheapest price that anybody will be able to get it right now online.
$50 off.
$50 off. Excuse me. That's correct. You can't get it for $50. $50
right,
off.
Right.
It brings it right now. It brings it down to $299 if they buy the whole model that you just showed.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about what it doesn't do. What is it gonna protect my cell phone if I'm inside my house?
Yeah, I'll jump on that, JJ. So it doesn't protect anything that's not plugged in. And believe it or not, we do get that question all the time. They're like, well, if it's in the house, it should be protected. It doesn't have a magical spell that protects it with a dome. It's not like that. And we don't want to give any misconceptions. If the device is installed, everything that's plugged into your home's electrical system is protected. If it's not plugged in, it's not protected. The other thing, and we kind of already addressed it, is it does protect 100% against lightning, but it only will take a single strike of lightning. We don't want people to think it just can take multiple lightning strikes. That's why we do offer the really good warranty where it's just $50 for replacement. But that is important to know, that it will only take a single lightning strike. What else, Tim? What am I forgetting?
We don't, if it's plugged in, we can protect it. We don't protect anything that's not plugged into it. We're just real clean and simple.
Right.
We don't try to overpromise what it does. anytime that a spike or any kind of over voltage, if someone hits a power pole down the street that would cause a over voltage coming in, we're going to catch it. If it's a lightning strike, we're going to catch it. It is a complete whole house surge protector. The neat thing about it is we're really, really, really fast that we catch an EMP. And that's the key. That's what sets us apart. We catch that 5 billionths of a second spike that is totally over within 1 millionth of a second. And we do that very, very well. That's where we shine and sets us apart from the others.
Sure. And the other thing, Tim, well, I was to say the other thing is we're kind of a nimble and evolving company. So, Tim, when he invented the first one, we just had 1 or 2 units. Now we have 40 models, and we just kind of keep growing. Somebody calls and says, "Hey, I need a specific thing for this." And I'm sure people watching right now have probably spoken to me and Tim and asked for specific things. And now we have, 42 or 43 models. I don't know. I think we list 40, but we're probably up to almost 50 that isn't publicly listed yet. And we're just constantly developing new things. And, we've got solar products for DC. We've got vehicle models. We've got different forms of generator models, 3-phase models, international
Can you talk a little bit about the DC, the solar product? I'm interested in that.
Yes. I'll talk about it.
Solar generator as well. How does that work?
Sure. Well, so if you look at solar, there's primarily 3 different systems. You have off-grid, grid-tied, and then a combination of somebody who probably had a grid-tied and said, I kind of want some battery banks as well. So depending on your system is the unit that you'll pick. We have basically a DC model for every type of system. So let's say the primarily people that we deal with are off-grid. We do have some grid-tied, but most people are off-grid or trying to go off-grid. So what we're looking at is the maximum input voltage of the charge controllers, depending on the system. So if they have Outback, which is a fantastic company, it'd be the Flex 60 or 80 or whatever they have. And they're normally a 90 to 120 volt DC system. So basically we will have them install a 90 to 120 volt, which clips at around 150 volts. And that protects the DC system inside of the solar. And actually it's important to know, and I'm glad we get a chance to talk about this, is it's a misconception, but the majority of solar panels in solar systems are actually impervious to EMP. They have a photovoltaic coating on top of them or inside of them that makes them pretty much resistant. There is a small, a small percentage of them. Yeah, and Tim could probably speak more eloquently on that, but there's a very low likelihood they're going to be destroyed. Primarily what you're looking at is protecting the inverters, the charge controller, and any other small components inside the system. However, inside of a 2-foot by 4-foot solar panel, there's up to 5,000 square feet of copper trace, which makes the solar panel pretty much a microgrid, collecting a large amount of electricity from an EMP or solar flare that will be induced into that system. And that's why we try to put the EMP shield on a off-grid system. It's going to go right in that charge controller to collect that spike on pretty much the first thing that goes into it. So, and Tim, do you have any more to speak on the solar?
On your solar panels, you have your photovoltaic coating. There's nothing there that can really be damaged. It's like when you're talking about your older ham radios, you had tubes. Well, you still had diodes, you still had capacitors. There's nothing there. When we get into your charge controllers, you do have some microprocessors and some other things. When you look at what is affected from an EMP, what's affected is your silicon arsenide. It's silicon and arsenic, silicon arsenide, which is actually what makes up your microprocessors and your switching chips. Not diodes, not capacitors, things like that. It is the microprocessors that are damaged. You don't have that in your solar panels. So we need to protect the charge controllers and your charging circuits and your microprocessors that does all of your control. That's what we need to protect in your inverter. So it goes parallel with your solar panels, and we protect all of your electronics. That's where it goes. So we have those. So when we came out with the original EMP shield for the panel, for the electrical panel, we had people starting to call about solar systems. That's why we came up with so many, because we had some that had 12-volt panels. We had some that had 24 and 48. Then we got into your Outbacks, which were 90 to 120 that need to be clipped at 150. Then we got into a lot of your grid tied, which had dual battery packs, dual charging circuits. So we ended up with a total of 38 models, and we ended up with some with cars, like the Prius. We have Priuses that are earlier than 2004. We have a 12-volt / 200-volt. We also have 12-volt / 400-volt based on some of the cars. So
that brings up an interesting question. We had a question here. Somebody said, will it protect an electric car if the car is plugged into the home power charging system?
We have a unit that can go onto a Prius that we've done for a 2004.
Okay. So it would need to be a separate. It would need to be a separate unit then for those.
Sure. So I'll actually address that, because remember the induction. So the electrons are going to get induced into everything. So the home model will protect that AC system, but the car is still going to induce electrons. So regardless of we're stopping that surge from coming into the vehicle from the AC side, the DC side still needs to be protected as well.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So that's cool. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Tim. Did I?
That's fine.
Okay.
Well, on your Prius, you also have a gas engine there that lets it run when your battery is low, and it also charges. So we have one that helps with the charging of the battery system to keep it from happening when the EMP hits. So we custom design when people have a unique situation, and now it becomes a standard model, because if one customer needs it, there are other customers in the future that needs it. So that's why we have additional models continuously coming, because as we have customers that have a Prius or another type of car or another situation with a common use, then we just start making a new model.
Gotcha. So let's see. Mark Chase says, can this protect up to 6 kilovolts?
We can build. We are building for certain agencies 13,800 volt for grid. So we are building grid tied 4160, 13,800, 4160 volts, etc. For different government agencies, and we can build according to whatever is needed.
Whatever specifications they need there. Yes. All right, cool. Let's see here. Mark Chase asks, what bandwidth and field levels do these devices protect against?
Okay. If you're dealing with a standard, if you want to call it standard EMP, that would be from a nuclear EMP or a CME. You're dealing with 300 megahertz in frequency or lower. That's from a nuclear or a coronal mass injection, 300 megahertz or lower. That's the bandwidth that you're dealing with. If you're dealing with RF weapons, you could go all the way up to 15 gigahertz. So it's according to what you're wanting to design for.
Gotcha. So you guys have your 40 or 50 products that you sell that are common usage kind of things and stuff. But what I'm hearing you say is if people have a specific need, then you will develop a product that will cover that specific need and stuff as well.
That's absolutely correct, and that's how our models come about. Normally, what we realize is if one person needs it, lots of people need it, and then when we put it out there, more people come to it. So, for instance, the Kodiak Energy generator. We're developing a platform to be able to connect with their special connectors into that system. And, since then we've had like 20 or 30 calls with people. It's a really great system. And so people want the EMP shield for it. And so stuff like that.
When you get one of those, let me know, because I'd love to see it, because I've got one myself.
Yeah. Yep, we'll do.
So got another question here. Steve Steelguard 327 says, "Will," and this is a little off from the EMP shield, but says, "Will EMP kill my red dots on my rifles? If so, how do I protect them?"
Too
So that's
small
a standalone electronic unit, right?
When it's too small of a footprint, there's no microprocessor on it. What you've got is a resistor, and you've got a LED, light emitting diode. You don't have any silicon arsenide in any of that. Your red dot will work until the battery goes out, EMP or no EMP.
So essentially, the microprocessor is kind of the key thing with the EMPs, right? I mean, something like this is that going to be affected? Do you think a little?
If it's not shielded correctly.
Okay, so something like that could be, and the solution for that would be to put it in a Faraday cage. I'm assuming, is that
yes
the recommendation? Yes. What's your guys' experience with like the Faraday bags and those kinds of things? Like, what do you recommend as far as that?
There's some great bags out there. The first thing I would always say is just go buy yourself a metal trash can. You know, you can get one for $20 at Home Depot or Lowe's. Make sure you line it correctly and keep the lid closed. It's a fairly good Faraday cage. But there is some great companies out there. We have an R&D lab we're actually developing right now, so we haven't had a chance to personally test any of these. But you know, heard a lot of good things about Mission Darkness. I think, was it Mission Darkness? I can't remember the name. But there's a couple out there that they seem to be doing very well. A couple were listed by Homeland Security. So for anybody who does want to buy an EMP bag or a Faraday cage, just go look at the Homeland Security document. They've done their research and listed who they believe to be credible EMP or Faraday bags, Faraday cages, and stuff like that. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So, okay, we got another question. Maureen says, "Can any electrician install these?" She says, "I need 2 because we also have all home backup generator for Generac generator."
Yeah.
So.
Yes. Yeah. So we go ahead, Tim. I'm sorry.
Yes, any electrician can install it, and a lot of homeowners that do their own electrical around the house can install it. And we do provide instructions with each of the units.
Here's the instructions. It must be fairly simple because I'm going to show you guys. It's 1 page, so not too hard to install. I don't think.
Sure.
It looks like it'd be pretty straightforward. So,
and the vehicle model is actually even simpler. We just put step-by-step pictures, and you know, anybody can install the vehicle model with a wrench in about 10 minutes at a time.
Very cool. What's the price on the vehicle?
And it's the same as the home. So they're currently listed at, so I think they're listed at $379, but they're on sale at $349. We may be having it. So the price right now is $349, but there may be a price increase in the future to $379 on most models. We're not there yet. So right now they're still on sale for $349. But actually I was going to kind of caveat on something else. The other important thing is we are finalizing our UL testing right now, 1449. And that's something that a lot of electricians want to see. Mm-hmm. So in about a week and a half or 2 weeks, we will be done with UL testing, and we will have all of those certifications as well. So yeah.
Excellent. And so that basically, can you explain why it's important to have the UL listing? And because isn't that, if I remember correct, and I'm not an expert on all this kind of stuff, but if let's say your house burns down and the unit is found to be at fault, if it was UL listed, then your insurance will cover it. If it wasn't UL listed, then your insurance might be like, oh, that wasn't a UL listed product or something like that. Is that close? Or
not necessarily, but that's also one of the reasons we have a DOD tested and a tested unit, but we also have an insured unit where our unit is also insured because it has been through testing. We are just getting the UL listing on it also for an additional tested, showing that we have had it tested by the underwriter's laboratory testing.
Okay. And it's sort of the UL laboratories, underwriter laboratories is kind of the standard for electronic products within the United States. Is that right?
That is correct.
That's correct.
You have the ETL, UL, and CSA. Any of those laboratories just show that they've had independent lab that has tested, and it is a safe standard testing.
Okay. We kind of covered this one earlier, but it's something that I hear come up multiple times. Chris asks, how long do I have to wait to pull my stuff out of a Faraday cage or bag after the initial event? So they're concerned with multiple hits. We touched on this a little bit earlier, and I'll just recap. You guys tell me if I get it wrong. Basically, within 8 or 9 hours, there can't be another strike, right? Because the atmosphere is charged, or if there is, it's not going to be effectual if there is another strike.
For the E1 and E2. Yeah,
okay.
During that portion, you can't have another E1 or E2.
Okay. But it doesn't make any difference really if you have the whole house system as far as that goes, because it can handle multiple strikes.
That's correct. It's just continuously monitoring, passively monitoring the system, and it'll take multiple strikes. In testing, like we mentioned before, it took 42 with zero degradation.
It does have to be powered though, as Tim said earlier. So you would want to get your generator out and get it going and have power going to it.
Right. Well, so I think Tim actually, and address me if I'm wrong, Tim, but it's not so much powered. It has to be a connected circuit. So what he meant is if the breaker was kicked. So for instance, there doesn't have to be power to the circuit. It just has to be a completed circuit. Is that correct, Tim?
Yes. Okay. During when you've had the first EMP and the power goes out because of the grid being down, you can get your generator out, crank it up right afterwards. What you're going to have is an E3, but the E3 is going to be affecting the grid and not your small generator, because it's the grid that it's going to be affecting. When there's a couple of effects that happen. When the E1 and E2 is actually a DC or direct current DC spike because of the electrons.
Interesting.
When the bomb goes off, it actually causes a bulge in the magnetosphere of the Earth. And the magnetosphere of the Earth that covers all the way around the Earth literally bounces. And it's that bounce and fluctuation that gives you an AC or an alternating current during the E3, because it is bouncing back and forth for those few hours as it's trying to slow down and the current and the discharge of the atmosphere. After the first bomb goes off, it is vibrating. If multiple bombs go off, it just continues to vibrate longer. So after the first bomb, you don't get the E1 or E2 anymore because the atmosphere is charged. The only thing you get is a longer vibration. So instead of having an E3 last for 4 hours or 5 hours, it may last 10, 11, 12, or 13 hours, according to how many bombs have gone off. That's the reason for the difference in length. So that's it's understanding what an EMP is and how it really works. There's a lot of misnomers out there. There's a lot of myths. And that's why we're trying to give people real information on what an EMP is. There's a lot of what you see in the movies isn't all the truth that is out there for what a real EMP is. Right. We want to make sure we give people truth.
Very cool. And a little bit off subject, how would it affect radio communications after an EMP? Is there going to be a period of time where radio communications may be sporadic or?
Okay. During an EMP, the only communications will be HF and LF, low frequency and what you call high frequency. High frequencies are I'm a ham operator. Right. It's between 1.3 megahertz and 30 megahertz. Your VHF and UHF channels will be totally distorted. No communications whatsoever. The only communications that will be going through is between 1.5 megahertz and 30 megahertz, or basically anything less than 30 megahertz, is all the communications that will be communicating anywhere in the world.
And how long will that last?
Until the E3 settles down.
Okay, so a few hours on a single
until the atmosphere, the charge in the atmosphere goes down, and that 12 hours, 8 hours, 12, 15 hours before the communications can come back.
And that's basically because those charged ion or charged protons and everything are blocking the radio wave propagation?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
Well, and the other thing to consider too is we're talking about the frequency, but now when you're talking cell phones, so when the E3 portion does stop, if those towers are down, your cell phone's obviously still not going to work. Your internet's still not going to work. Then you can still go into UHF and VHF once it settles itself. But other communications will still obviously be down until they come back up or restored.
Right, and that would be a massive. I mean, because if you're talking about the E3 effects lasting multiple hours, I mean, you're probably going to have to replace all the copper in the lines, because that's going to cause the lines to sag and droop and all that kind of stuff too, right?
Yeah, so what's going to happen is the charge is going to continue to build unless something stops it. So unless there's a line that's dropped and the charge doesn't build past that point, it just continues to grow. A good example, and now I don't believe in EMP would be the same as a large solar flare, but a good example of what can happen is the Carrington event in 1859, where the Earth was hit with a very large solar flare. This is right around the time when the telegraph came out. And, they say they saw wires melting. They had telegraphs operating without being plugged in. Houses getting burned down, people getting, seriously injured. So that's what actually can happen from a large solar flare or from the E3 portion.
So that
brings
up a good question. I've heard people bring this up on some of the videos I've done on these before in the past. The fear of homes catching fire. Can you address that at all?
Well, the EMP shield is going to be doing the very same thing as it has a threshold voltage. And if anything goes above the threshold voltage, as soon as it gets to that threshold voltage, it's going to shunt it. Shunting it is a fancy word for shorting. As soon as it gets there, it's going to drop the voltage. Instead of letting the voltage get high in your house, it's going to drop it each time. So it's going to keep from those voltages getting high every time. It's going to keep dropping it. It will keep dropping it. At matter of fact, when the E1 and E2 come in, it will probably cause your main breaker to drop in your house, your 200 amp main breaker. It will probably drop your 200 amp main breaker and isolate your house. That's what it does when a lightning strike hits. Not only does it trip like it should, but it will trip the main breaker, a 200 amp main breaker. We have tripped 1200 and 1500 amp main breakers in commercial applications when a lightning strike is hit. Even though that it's on a smaller breaker, because of the way that it works, we have actually tripped and caused it to trip larger breakers. And that keeps it from harming your house, even when it starts bringing up higher.
And it's important to caveat that Tim's talking about the E3 portion. So the E1 and E2 are so fast that it's not going to trip a breaker. That's correct, Tim, right? So you're talking about the E3 portion and a lightning strike.
Yes.
Okay, so for a home that has the EMP shield on it, there's a very low likelihood of fire breaking out, is what I'm hearing you say.
That is correct.
Okay. Yep. Just out of curiosity, I'm just thinking about how my own house is set up here. I have I guess it's a reduction transformer right outside my house, located there. Would it cause that to blow up or explode, or what do you think?
Well, so it depends on the distance, and something we kind of addressed a little earlier, but I'll touch on just a little bit more in detail is the EMP shield. We talked about 250 linear feet of protection. It actually is in both directions.
Okay.
So, because remember, we're talking about the induction and the current coming from all directions, induction through the structure of your house and also from the grid into your house. So we're actually protecting 250 linear feet into your house and also outside of your house. So if there is things within 250 feet, they will be protected up to a certain point, and that's where I need Tim to kind of speak on the engineering side of that. But the lines outside the house are also protected.
Interesting.
We have designed a custom unit for power companies that we are working with several power co-ops, that the power company is actually going to be offering the unit to their customers. It will plug into the meter base, and then their meter base will plug into our unit. And it is a unit that the power companies will actually be offering to their customers for $5 a month or $7.50 a month.
Right.
That it is a unit that is being provided by power companies.
Very cool. So I got a question from David Knox, and he's got lots of good questions this time. He says, what is the real truth about how long the grid would be down due to a CME or EMP due to a nuclear strike?
Wow. No, that's a tough one. Go ahead, Tim. I'll kind of talk quickly, actually. So I think it's a matter of opinion. It depends on what's destroyed, what level of impact the grid actually takes, and what process we are right now. And
there's a lot of factors.
There's so many variables.
Like geography, where it goes off, what the negative yield is, how high up in the atmosphere, all those kinds of things.
Right.
But let's just assume that it was positioned well enough to knock down all the very large power transformers in the States. What time frame are we looking at there?
Tim?
I would say you're looking at least 6 months.
Okay, and that's a short estimate, I'd say. I mean, and I from what the research that I did on it was that some people were talking 3 to 5 years. Now, I have also heard recently that there has been some efforts to start to have additional units that they can they're not really the full large size transformers, but they're smaller ones that they can daisy chain together in crises and stuff like that. Have you guys heard anything about that?
We have a different type of president than we've had in the past. We have a president that has put things in action 2 years ago that should have been put in action many years ago. That is national security. Infrastructure is national security. It may not be down to the power company level, but to the main infrastructure of the company or of a country. Don't think nothing has been being done in the last couple of years. There's more things that's going on.
I've been privy to some of those conversations too. There are a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes that aren't necessarily public knowledge because you don't really want everybody to know about all what you're doing for your defenses and those kinds of things.
And when you look at the executive order it come out, it talks about power being down for 6 months.
Yeah,
that's realistic. Be prepared to be without power for 6 months.
All right, very good. Somebody wrote another comment. They were just being silly, I guess. Okay, so I don't know if I have any other questions. I think you guys have done a pretty good job of answering everything. Let me see here. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to cover before we finished up? I'm just trying to check through the chat and see if I missed any big questions here.
Well, not trying to sell EMP shields, but one of the things about having an EMP shield, in the event of a nuclear EMP, your companies are not going to be out manufacturing additional equipment, refrigerators, TVs, computers, hardware that you're going to be wanting during that time. And when the grid starts coming back up, what you have is what you're going to have for a while. If it doesn't work, you didn't have an EMP shield, it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to get things for quite some time. So it is a really inexpensive insurance policy to protect what you have in the event of an EMP. And when things come back up, you'll still be able to have things to operate with.
Yeah, you're going to be miles ahead of everybody else. That's for sure. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
If you can afford a generator, especially if you can afford solar, in the event of EMP, you can afford and have some solar backup, because a generator is great, but where are you going to be able to get fuel and be able to get it to you? Solar is great. Wind is great. Thinking like that is really good, to be able to think, to have something alternate that you don't have to worry about going to buy fuel and so forth. If you can save and put that into perspective, be as prepared as possible.
Very good. So did get a couple more questions here. Mark Chase says, how will the migration to high voltage DC transmission lines affect the issue? I'm not really familiar with what he's talking about. Are you guys familiar with that?
There are a lot. You have your grid. Part of your grid does have DC transmission lines. Those are affected even harder than AC transmission lines. And that's something we'll just have to let the power companies work with.
Okay. And let's see. Doug Larrabee says, can you talk a little bit about pacemakers? Do you guys know if an EMP will affect a pacemaker?
It has a potential to. They should be shielded enough. If you can be around a microwave, you should be okay, because microwaves give off a lot of garbage, EMI. The pacemaker itself is shielded really well. So it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
Shouldn't be a problem.
So it kind of depends on the model that you have. Is that kind of what you're saying? If you can,
The age of it.
Yeah, the age of it, how long it's been around.
If it's been around a really long time, it's not as shielded as the newer ones.
Gotcha. Okay, and let's see. So this is an interesting one. Can an EMP go underground? And this is from Neil. If someone lives in a bomb shelter, will the EMP go through it? So how deep does it penetrate in the ground? I think I've read 6 to 8 feet in the past. Does that sound about right? Or
the most that I have heard of an EMP going in is about 20 feet.
Oh, wow. Okay. Even further.
And I don't know if that one has gone any deeper than 20 feet.
Okay. So most bunkers would be or shallower than 20 feet in most cases, I would imagine. So they probably would be affected. And that's, I assume, why Atlas Shelters is going to be putting their units in, or your guys' units in their shelters.
Well,
yes.
So if your shelter is made out of metal, it's going to be grounded and you're going to be in good shape anyway.
Gotcha. Okay. So Dr. Pepper Survival asked a question about solar panels, and we already covered that. So I'll just ask you to go back and check that earlier, because he did talk about that as well. Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to hit?
No, it was a pleasure having us on the show. Really appreciate it. Hopefully everybody takes advantage of that coupon that we're giving you. Because like we said, that's not available many other places. Nobody else will find that deal.
$50
that discount. Yeah,
that's pretty cool. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give away one of these to David Knox, because I don't know David, never met David, but he had a lot of really good questions as we were going through this. So David, if you will email me your home address, I'll send you one of these units, and also let me know what kind of panel you have, if it's a recessed panel or if it's sticking out on the wall, and that'll let you know whether or not you're going to get this one or whether or not you're going to get this one. So I appreciate all the good questions, you guys. I didn't announce the giveaway purposefully. I like to do them as a surprise at the end of the show, because it kind of rewards the people who've been hanging in there the whole time and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, if you guys have any questions, get them in here real quick, because we are going to be wrapping it up here shortly. So we've got the link down in the description below to get the discount. And your guys' website is just what, empshield.net?
EMPshield.com.
.com. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Very good. And like I said, we always appreciate it when you use the affiliate links. And I hope this was informative. It was very informative to me. And I thank you guys for your time, for coming on here. And yeah, that's good stuff. So
yeah.
All right,
Awesome.
guys.
All right. Thanks, TJ. Much appreciated.
All right. I'll talk to you guys later.
Thank you for having me.
You bet.